Here he is, Elite Prospects Director of Film Scouting, our draft insider from last year. Boy, the candy shop is open here as we know order for the 2022 NHL entry
Don't
draft.
do him like that. You have to introduce him as early contender in the Sakaris and Price playoff hockey pool.
All right.
He leads the charge right now.
He's still in first place?
He's oscillated in the top 5, but he's back on top. Cam Robinson, everybody. How are you, Cam?
I'm doing well, fellas. I am thoroughly enjoying sitting atop the playoff pool, too. My son, my 6-year-old, he's in it. So we made our picks together. I let him go first. And so he took a bunch of Panthers guys. And I was like, okay, just to make it fun, I'll try to take as few players that you took as possible, thinking that I'd be setting him up for the win. Lo and behold, it kind of
crushing your son. I'm crushing yours.
He's not even rooting for me. Whenever he checks the score, he's like, "Oh, you're still on top." Like he hates it that I'm winning. I'm like, "Don't you see? If I win, we both win."
First of all, I do the same thing with Carmen on March Madness. I'm like, you're taking all the teams that I'm not taking. It's a strategic way to go about
there you go.
a pool. Well done, Cam Robinson. Even if you're using minors to get to the top of the pool, congratulations nonetheless. Canucks picking 15th. What kind of player can they expect to get there?
There's going to be some options for sure. So I just released a mock draft this morning at EP Ringside where I mocked up the top 16 picks. Obviously, they're going to be kind of sitting there waiting to see what happens, right? At that spot, there's going to be some upside picks. There's going to be some sliders. I do kind of get a feeling that if there's someone that hasn't really slid that they have high on their board, that they might get funky, that they could look at sliding back and picking up, maybe another second round pick if they slide back 5 or 6 spots into a different tier. Maybe they go off the board a little bit with a player that I think rates a little more highly on the analytical side of things versus like public consensus lists. I gave them in the mock draft. I went with Pavel Mintyukov, which is a Russian defender out of Saginaw, who missed his entire draft -1 season due to the pandemic shutdown, but just stepped in this year and was terrific on a not a great team. Put up nearly a point a game from the back end, loves to rush the puck. And, for my money, I know some people see him as kind of borderline defensively, but I see some pretty nuanced decision-making on the defensive side of things too. So for me and for the rest of the crew at EP Ringside, we see him as a top 10 asset. I think we had him 7th on our board when we last ranked. But, speaking of people on the team side of things, I don't think that's a slam dunk that he's considered a top 10 prospect league-wide. Quinn Hughes wasn't supposed to be there at 7. I think that there's a decent chance that this is the type of player that could be sitting there at 15 for them. And I think that'd be a really nice pull at that stage of the draft and to fill an obvious need in the prospect cupboard.
Historically speaking, the picks between 10 and 20 are usually pretty good, usually turn into NHLers. But just reading what Patrick Alvin told Ben Kuzma, the province, it sounds like this might be one of those drafts where there isn't a huge distinction between guys at 15 and guys later in the first round and the second round. Is that fair, Cam, or do you see greater separation in those tiers?
No, I think that's right. I think that like I was talking with a guy on the team side just yesterday, and we were just kind of saying like, it's almost after like pick 5 or 6 where you're kind of like, okay, now it's like a big mosh of players that you could realistically like someone over the other that isn't going to go until 20 versus someone who's going to go at 6 or 7. Like it is tightly compact in that range. And I think that's the part and parcel of the class, is that it's not a demonstrably strong class. There are players that have like really high upside, but have some warts, have some question marks. There's some electric wingers that are a little slight that have trouble getting to the inside. There's, a big powerful center like Connor Geekie, who has great hands, a great mind for creating offense, but the foot speed is a big question mark. Defensemen that are, a kid like Denton Matejchuk out of the Western League, who I don't know if I've ever scouted a defenseman like this, who he's never seen a puck he didn't want to rush. Like he gets a puck touch on every play, everywhere. But the whole, playing defense side of thing is a big question mark at this point. So, there's these things you have to navigate, and you have to look at these players and be like, can we get them into our player developmental system? Can we work with them? Can we mask some of these deficiencies? Can we correct them? And in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we might have ourselves a big time player. So I think that's each team's list. We say it every year. There's going to be some variance, some disparity between everyone's list. But this year, I think more so than most, there's going to be a wide array of choices for each team to have. And that's why I think at 15, that if there isn't a guy like Mintyukov, who, Rick Dhaliwal was saying today that the Canucks are interested in him too. I'm sure a lot of teams are, but if a guy like that isn't there, that, they might take a player that I might have, 30th on my board for whatever reason, is that they might see something that they like a little bit off the board, and they're going to, put their stamp on that player.
Who's the faller? Who's the guy that's probably the 5 to 10 guy on a lot of the draft boards right now, but you could see because of that missing. I've seen Geeky on a couple of these lists, a Korchinski. Who's the faller that could come down to 15 that maybe was 8 on somebody's original list?
Yeah, there's a couple guys. Like I said, because there's so much disparity there, is that, a kid like Matt Savoy, who just had a really big season in the WHL, 90 points in like 65
A
games,
name that we've known for so long, Cam, because
right?
he was into the WHL at 15.
Exactly. Yeah. Didn't quite get exceptional status granted to him, even though he was like just a day away from being old enough to play anyways, but got to play half a season there. Played his draft -1 in the USHL and was excellent there too, and came over and had a really nice season this year for Winnipeg. But he's not very big. He plays the middle of the ice. He thrives on the power play, but not so much at even strength. He kind of, he can chisel some candy cane points sometimes, some easier points. So there is some questions about his translatability. A kid like Frank Nazar, another center with the program, who, we love at EP Ringside. He's got high offensive skills. He's a great skater, great hands. I spoke with him this year and wrote a big article about him. He's really focused on adding distribution to his game, adding defensive play to his game. Like he tries to mimic, he watches all this Patrice Bergeron tape, all this Braden Point tape. Like he wants to be like a hybrid of those two players. But public lists, they've got him kind of sitting there anywhere from, number 7 all the way to like 24. So this is a type of player that some view as like a really high end asset that if he breaks right for you, you could be looking at a first rounder or a first liner, I should say, where, if things maybe don't come along, maybe, another some smaller center iceman, if he can't get into the middle of the ice at the NHL level, if his defense can't translate all that well, maybe he's like a third liner, maybe he's not even in the NHL. So there is risk attached to a player like that. But, when you're picking at 15, those are the type of guys you take a swing on, right? Is that you're not looking for a safe bottom 6 guy or a number 4, 5, 6 or 5, 6 defenseman. You're looking for someone who can maybe play for you and impact down the line. So any of those type of guys, I think that would be a terrific spot for Vancouver to be at, to catch a faller like that. And then, like I said, if there's no one that really does fall, then look at move back. Look at someone that you guys, the analytics or the scouting department really likes that maybe isn't as high on some other teams. Where it's another kid's, excuse me, is Brad Lambert, who coming into this season was looking at a top 3 pick.
I'd take a flyer on him for sure. I would. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's all wheels and hands. Like it's hard for players like that to miss when he's got such great speed. He's got great hands. He drives the middle of the ice. It's just, the awareness, some of the decision making, some of the consistency has been a problem for him, but, had a hard time in the Liga this year for stretches, but showed out excellently at the World Juniors for the short tournament before it got shut down. So there's a lot of upside there. And another player that I think is going to be on some teams' lists in the top 10. And, I'd heard earlier that there's some teams that don't even like him in the first round. So there's going to be a lot of movement, I think, this season.
You had a response for us for our poll question that we released on Twitter. Would you trade JT Miller for the Devils' 2nd overall pick? Explain your response to the fine listener.
Yeah, so I said one of those deals that I think both teams would say no to. I think for the Devils, they are a team that has some cap space, especially with PK Subban, I believe, is coming off the books this year. They want to take a step forward, right? Like, has any team gotten as much lottery luck as they have in the last 4 or 5 years? They've got a ton of young assets, right? Like they're ready to take a step forward. Jack Hughes is a superstar. Nico Hischier's coming into his own. Jesper Bratt stepped up this year. Dawson Mercer, they got Holtz. It's a plethora of options. But, so adding a veteran presence like JT Miller would make sense for them. But if I'm New Jersey, I'm like, why don't I just wait until next summer and sign him for free if he's available? Or why don't I go and trade, if I'm going to move the 2nd overall pick, why don't I get someone who's 25 versus someone who's going to be 29 and staring down this massive contract extension, the cost of that's going to be. And from Vancouver's perspective, it's not 2023. If it's the 2nd overall pick next year, you'd sprint to make that deal because you could get yourself Matthew Mishkov or maybe Adam Fantilli if you're afraid of the Russian factor. But this year doesn't have that player. Logan Cooley is going to be a really strong top 6 center, but there's going to be a bit of wait time. And, he doesn't project to be a superstar. You could go get yourself a Simon Nemec or a David Jurasek, who's going to be they're both going to be really nice right shot defensemen. You could probably see them partnering up with Quinn Hughes for a long time, and that would be great. But if you're moving JT Miller, with this year attached to him at a good cost, coming off a career year, you're looking to fill the cupboards. You're looking to probably get 2, 3, 4 assets that can really help you out long term versus one that you're like, yeah, we're gonna get a good prospect at number 2 here. But is it going to really move the needle in their situation? Vancouver needs a lot of stuff. And so if they're going to move on from Miller, I think they're looking for a lot more assets. Like the stuff we were talking about before the deadline, the Rangers were interested and things like that, is that you're looking for Braden Schneider, who is probably comparable to a Jurasek or a Nemec, especially in the safety factors, that he's already here. He's already in the NHL playing on the right side and looking good, versus these kids. You still have wait time. There's developmental issues. There's more risk attached to it. And you wanted more. You wanted Schneider. You want, a pick. You want maybe Kraftsov. So you're looking for multiple pieces to try to hit at least 1 home run. And then if you're lucky, maybe 2. If you take the second overall pick, you're probably going to get a good player, maybe not a great player. And is that really enough? So it's just one of those things I think that both clubs wouldn't really be interested in.
So wise. Is there any wonder why he's in the top 10 of our hockey pool, or is we're toiling down around 290 or something like that? At least that's last time I checked. I mean, it's
like he's got the answer key and we're just pouring over the question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also fascinating because, Tom Fitzgerald said at his year-end press conference, we consider moving that first round pick. Now, it's one thing to say that when you expect to pick 5th or 6th. Now you're picking 2nd. I think it's a little more real. And as Cam outlines, I'm not sure there's a clear-cut number 2 here. So this could be a whole lot of fun. I did have one more Canucks question for you, and that is Patrick Allvin and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Cam, they've made 1 first-round pick since 2015. So how much do we know about their tendencies at the draft table with so few first-rounders and high picks over the years?
Yeah, we don't. But, it's the circumstances over there. And I would have done the same thing. If, you got Crosby and Malkin, and I would just be going for it every single year. Is like, let's just try. Let's see what can happen. Let's move those first round picks. Let's try to support them right now and see what we can do. And now in Vancouver, obviously that situation is completely different. We need to make these picks. So I think it's everything's on the table. I think like I mentioned, I think there's a possibility of trading back. I think there's a possibility maybe even trading up if they really love somebody and attach a little something sweetener to it. I think the chances of them maybe attaching that pick to something in a bigger deal is maybe less likely, but hey, who knows if they can get themselves an impact U24, U23 skater that can step in right away. It's like, yeah, attach that 15th overall pick, because, the life cycle of this core is in the next kind of 3 years. Well, you have Thatcher Demko at that good price tag before, you have to re-up Besser and Horvat and Pettersson. And it's, I think that they're looking at the next 2-3 year as the window to maybe take a step back next year if they have to, if they move Miller, and then really step forward and go for it. So the chances of them moving that pick, I think, are the lowest of them all. But I think anything's on the table right now outside of them drafting a goalie at 15.
He is Elite Prospects Director of Film Scouting and Draft Aficionado and Expert. Good luck to you and the 6-year-old in the Sekerson Price hockey pool. And if the 6-year-old wins the weekend at the Wall Center here, tell him he's too young to bring his girlfriend. All right.
There you go. Yeah. He'll rack up the room service bill, though. That's for sure.
Thanks, Cam.
Okay, thanks, fellas.
Cam Robinson, everybody, of Elite Prospects. He did a fantastic job with us as the draft insider last year, and we'll be calling on him again this year to make sense of this new regime and how they approach the NHL entry draft, as mentioned. And I'm 100% with him. I mean, you got those sorts of players here playing for a cup, the great Lawrence Gilman line. There are two types of team in the NHL. Those who are trying to get pregnant and those who are trying to have a baby. And the Pittsburgh Penguins were trying to have a baby, and in fact had a couple of them over the course of Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin's tenure there. So we'll see how they approach this, because this isn't exactly the same scenario as they had in Pittsburgh for all those years.
No.